how to elevate the overall workforce. We believe that people are at the heart of successful organizations and their team members' well being, rewards, and career development. It's all essential to a happy and healthy workplace. And so this show discusses the practical and effective leadership strategies for top executives, senior professionals, and talent managers overall. So first of all, I'd like to introduce you to our expert contributor today, and we're going to be talking about cracking the code of human connection with a truly inspirational leader, one that has a huge impact across the globe, and I'm very envious of all of her travels. But Jennifer Cahill, she's the founder and CEO of OptiMatch. And Jennifer leverages her vast media experiences, such as appearing on the BBC News, the NBC network, and she helps guide professionals towards having those meaningful connections and helping them strive and have career success. So she's established her own staffing company in the past. She's authored a book called Stop Hopping, Start Hunting, a job seeker's guide to finding the dream job. And she's also had a lot of philanthropic type of experiences, helping build schools overseas and so forth. So as you can tell, Jennifer embodies a commitment to transforming lives overall. So let's jump into this discussion and learn how to really have those impactful human connections with Jennifer Cahill. Welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you so much, Sam. It's a pleasure to be here with you and your audience, and happy to share with the rest of your team. I think we have one of your other team members on here too today.
Oh, great. Let me go ahead and bring them on in. Looks like we have Sumit Singla joining us.
Hi, Sumit. Great to have you here with us today.
Hi, Jennifer. Nice to meet you. Good morning, Sam.
Good morning. So Jennifer, as we get into the topic here, first I want to dive into some of your other accomplishments as you had. So I know that you created you authored a book and so forth. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how you came about that and what drove you to really writing that book and who you're trying to help?
Well, over the years, I had spent about 15, 20 years of my career, beginning in my early 20s, in the legal recruiting space. And I noticed that the same questions kept coming up over and over. I used to host a popular show called Get Yourself the Job. And that show and the blog and the book, everything aimed to support job seekers. I wish, Sam and Sumit, if I had it all my way, I would gift everyone in the world their dream job. You look under your chair and you get a dream job, and you look under your chair and you get a dream job. I like to think of myself as the Oprah of dream jobs when I was in that industry. And I started off with a blog called Get Yourself the Job and wrote over 200 articles. And then people said, well, why don't you just, it'd be much better if you put this in a book format so we could have like the resume section, the interview section, the, consciousness of job hunting section. And yeah, it got published. I did a book tour for it, accidentally wound up on Conan O'Brien. That's a story for another day. One of my staff members is like, oh, Jen, bring a copy of your book to Conan. I was going as an audience member. And I was like, Scott, I'm not going as a guest. I was doing a media tour, but I was certainly not being featured on Conan Life Goals. And accidentally, it's like a whole funny bit, but you'd have to Google my name and Conan's name to see the whole story.
Wow, that's so fun. Yeah, we'll have to hear about that at some other time. But then you also have your podcast. So tell us about your podcast.
Yeah, so after I completed, so we sold J Hill Staffing, which was my first company in 2018, to a subsidiary of one of the largest accounting firms in the world. And after selling that, we ran Get Yourself the Job, which was the old podcast, for a little bit longer. And then I kind of did a 180-degree pivot around that time. So it was late 2019. I was offered a TV hosting gig with a group called Awake TV and the opportunity to co-moderate a panel with Deepak Chopra and one of my favorite professors in college, Don Hoffman. And that kind of throttled me, for lack of a better word, into the space of consciousness, which I had been dabbling in as a hobby. And then next thing you know, I was so honored and grateful to get to make friends like Deepak and Bruce Lipton and Greg Braden and the folks at HeartMath, Dr. Roland McCready. And out of the joy of it, I love engaging in the consciousness. Even right now, if you're a job seeker and you're watching the show, or if you're an employer, everything has consciousness. In fact, when I do a lot of talks around the world, I was giving a keynote earlier this year in Los Angeles to all of the people who run law firms in Southern California. And I began the talk by sharing that a lot of people don't realize that our perception is everything. In fact, may I start and share a little story? This is the story I opened the talk
Okay.
with, about our perception and resilience and how it all ties together. So, in the late 1980s, there was something called the biosphere that was created. And the reason the biosphere was created was because they wanted to test, could we sustain life on another planet? Could we grow plants and animals and trees and sustain life? And they were wildly successful, except for one minor glitch. Would you like to know what that was?
Yeah. What is it?
The trees, Sam and Sumit, they grew faster and taller than ever before. But before they hit maturity, they fell over. Any guesses as to why?
Why?
The one thing they had not considered in cultivating a perfect environment was wind. You see, in nature, wind causes the trees to sway and to
Mm.
build what's called stress wood and to cause their roots to penetrate deeply. And in humans, there's an equivalent called eustress. So, unfortunately, what's happened as we've evolved as a society, we've come to treat all stress as bad stress, when in reality, eustress is what allows us to be resilient. And an analogy I use around this is it's like having an infinitely pitch black warehouse where all you have in this pitch black warehouse is a little pin light to kind of direct your attention. Well, that's the equivalent of our perspective. Leading neuroscience tells us that per second we are bombarded with 11 million bits of information at a subconscious level per second. That means you just processed 100 million bits.
Hmm.
And at a conscious level, any guess as to how many of those bits we're paying attention to at a conscious level?
I can only imagine just a small fraction.
Less than that, 50 to 120 bits.
Ah,
That's how many we're processing out of 11 million per second. So our perspective is everything. Long before I got into the consciousness space, which I now realize really permeates everything I do, this is not just some fun woo-woo thing out there. It's scientifically proven that if I'm looking for being unlucky, in fact, there was a great research paper I just read about this, where somebody went out and told their participants that if they did X, Y, and Z, they would be luckier. And 6 months later, down the road, they were still performing and had luckier things happening to them. So life occurs to us as we perceive it. If we see a thing as good, it becomes good. If we see a thing as bad, it becomes bad. And in fact, one of my old team members, I was so grateful for the business coach I brought on. If any of you out there listening, you're considering getting a coach or a mentor, even if it's somebody for free and you're mentoring each other, do it. It makes all the difference in the world. I have an accountability buddy I talk to every day, Monday through Friday, for 15 minutes. And when we have somebody who helps us to see things differently, my business coach came in, had been terrible. I had been a horrible person to be coached. A little secret about me, I tell people, I'm like, hi, I'm Jennifer K. Hill, and I'm a bit of a recovering jerk. So yeah, the story will kind of illustrate that, because back in the day, I had a team member I was frustrated because she wasn't doing things the way I wanted her to, and she wasn't returning calls. And so I'm considering taking action on it. And my business coach, Julian at the time, now the co founder of our new company, OptiMatch, he said to me, Jen, what if the reason that she is failing is because you are looking for her to be a disappointment?
hmm.
Excuse me, go screw yourself, mister. I was like, I'm going to fire you. No, that's not possible. I was like, I have a list here. So he gave me an exercise that changed my life. He said, Jen, for 1 week, I want you to write down one good thing she does every day. That's it. I'm not asking for rocket science here.
Hmm.
You don't even have to tell her. I just want you to do it for your own self. I did it every day. And at first I did it begrudgingly. And then all of a sudden it became easier and easier, because all of a sudden I was focusing those 50 to 120 bits of conscious information on what she was doing well instead of where I was frustrated. By the end of that week, she was kicking butt and taking names. And I am proud to say that she is the EVP who took over the company for me after I sold it. And she's doing even better than I did with running the company. It's still profitable 6 years post acquisition.
Wow. So, I mean, you're talking about the importance of really reflecting and understanding having a positive outlook on life, of course, but really thinking about appreciation, thinking about how people are impacting in a positive way, and not only focusing on the negative.
Yeah.
So, one thing I just want to point out there, I mean, this is one of the biggest problems that I see in organizations. I mean, there's just, for some reason, there's something in the human equation where we just have a hard time saying thank you, you know, and really, we're always looking for the negative. Why is that?
I think that unfortunately part of it is societal. It depends on different cultures. I remember when I was building the first school I ever built in 2017 in Nepal, the people were so happy. They were
Mm.
just delighted and they had so little. They had so little, no running water, no toilets, no electricity. I think that as we've evolved as a capitalistic culture, we take a lot of things for granted, and appreciation is something we don't cultivate.
Mm.
In fact, a wonderful guest I would recommend having on the show is one of my favorite guests I interviewed 2 or 3 times for the old Get Yourself the Job show, Dr. Paul White, who is the
Huh?
author of Appreciation at Work. So Dr. White, when he first came on the show, he taught me something very profound. He collaborated with Dr. Gary Chapman, the author of the 5 Love Languages, and they did the same thing in the 5 Love Languages, but for appreciating one another at work. So fast forward, I've been applying what I learned from Dr. White, and I'm building our new team now as we've gone through the acquisition and we're growing. And we had a team member in our Bay Area office. And I will always remember asking him, I always asked every employee this as soon as Dr. White taught it to me. Day one, when somebody starts working with me, I say, how do you prefer to be appreciated? Would you like public acknowledgement in front of the team? Do you want, more one-on-one time? Do you like Starbucks gift cards? What makes you happy and feel appreciated and seen and heard? And this gentleman up in our Bay Area office said to me, Jennifer, please don't ever acknowledge me publicly. That would mortify me. I would be so offended by that and I would probably quit. But he said, if you sent me a little private note to tell me what a great job I did, that would mean the world to me. But imagine how many bosses might mistakenly say, hey, great job, blah, blah, blah. And then he's mortified and quits a week later or quietly quits, right? How many of us have seen that happen?
Yeah, I mean, it's really important to know your people and what drives them. What have you seen about that, Sumit? I know that you dealing with a lot of different cultures and organizations. I mean, do we see your clients that are they actually learning about their people?
So yes and no. And Jennifer, when you were talking about appreciation, I was thinking of that in the Indian context, where although we're supposed to be a relatively polite society, um, simple things like just doing your own job, you're unlikely to hear a thank you for that. And a lot of people would question you. I mean, it could be something as simple as um, somebody who's a doorman holding the door open and you saying thank you, and the person might just turn back to you and say, "I'm just doing my job. What's there to thank me for it?" So we're kind of evolving there, learning from a lot of U.S. multinationals who are here, but on the recognition side, I mean, I can relate to that story because I had a team member who was absolutely terrified of being called onto the stage and appreciated. So when I tell her you're doing a fantastic job, she would actually threaten me and say, "Don't you dare nominate me for anything that involves going up on a stage and receiving something. I cannot stand up and say how I feel." So if that's what it's going to, I mean, if that's what's going to happen, I'd rather be absolutely crap at whatever I'm doing than do a good job. So that was really funny. But
Yeah,
yeah, I think
it's
we
it's
don't
something.
recognize or appreciate it enough.
Yeah, it's something that happens for all of us. And I think I'm going to add in a little extra one here. There's something I talk about. I know today we're going to be talking about cracking the code of human connection. And I really share this. People ask me all the time, how did you create OptiMatch, App, our company? How did you do all of this? And it was really out of survival. I used to struggle with depression and anxiety and a whole myriad of other things because I just could not figure out people. To me, when I was a little girl, it was like, you got a book on how to be a human being and you got a book on how to be a human being. And when I opened mine, it was blank inside.
Hmm.
So people were like this logic puzzle for me to solve. So I studied them and I was like, what makes them tick? And it caused me then to be able to better understand how to connect with others. So now, years, decades later, Would you guys like to know the number one secret to human connection?
What is that?
Connection to
Absolutely.
self. Connection to self is the key. It's the cornerstone and what I call the golden triangle of connection. Our connection for ourselves and with ourselves allows us then to connect to our purpose and our connection to others. But if that piece of the puzzle is broken, if I'm just trying to connect to others, or I'm just going after materialistic goals or purpose, whatever meaning in my life, if I don't first have that important connection to myself, it's all going to fall and crumble like a house of cards. And I only speak about that from a place of experience of having seen that I spent the first half of my life, more than that, probably two-thirds trying to people please. And then my best friend, one of my best friends from 20 plus years when I was going through a divorce, it was quite a year for me. When I turned 38, sold my first company, got diagnosed as being on the spectrum, and went through a divorce all in the same year. It's like,
Mm.
whoop, thank you for that little gift, universe. And one of my best friends says to me that year, she said, Jen, you deserve to find someone who will cherish you.
Yeah.
First, you need to cherish yourself. And it was the most profound wisdom I ever got. And I spent the last 6 years since that divorce and going through a process internally, externally, just learning how to fall in love with myself and accept myself so that way I could be in meaningful, authentic relationships with others and teach others how to do the same.
Well, let's dive in there a little bit, because I know that any meaningful relationship with another starts with that strong foundation in making sure that you know yourself, you love yourself, and so forth. And so, how does one go about strengthening that foundation? What have you found?
Quiet the noise. The reason that the loneliness epidemic is at 24%, according to a recent Gallup poll study across 142 different countries. I'm not talking about like just America or just Europe. 142 countries surveyed expressed feeling very or fairly lonely. And it's because there's so much noise. We're so disconnected. Yes, I'm so grateful to be able to be on a call like this and to be able to speak to whomever, wherever, whenever you're watching. And yet, if this is our only interface, then we're going to feel disconnected. We're going to feel lonely. There are entire organizations trying to combat the loneliness epidemic. Somebody was just sharing with me about one today. And my personal experience has been when we quiet that noise, you can do that in many ways. I'm a huge fan of heart focused breathing by HeartMath. I'm a HeartMath certified trainer. I do it every day with myself, and I teach the CEOs I work with how to do it. So, heart focused breathing quiets that amygdala. I should probably explain a little bit more about this of why this is this way. So there's something I like to call the three brain system. And that is the three parts of the brain that operate day to day for us. So the part of the brain down here is called our amygdala or our
Hmm.
reptilian brain. That is the fight or flight sort of side of our brain. Then we have the mammalian brain, the brain that says, am I safe? Are you like me? Can I trust you? And then you have the neocortex, the higher functioning, the executive function, the ability that allows us to have deep, meaningful conversations, create new ideas, and engage with one another. What most people don't know is if the lower brains don't feel safe, the higher brain can't function. So for me, that is really the essence of why we're seeing this loneliness epidemic and so much disconnection in the world is if we can first self-regulate our nervous system. I use HeartMath all the time. I was doing it right before this call. People say to me all the time, busy business people, they're like, Jennifer, I don't have time to meditate. Who has time for this? I'm in back to back Zoom calls 16 hours a day. You know what? You have 1 minute. When you go to pee, do heart focused breathing while you pee. While you go to walk your dog, do heart focused breathing while you walk your dog. While you go to cook dinner or prepare a breakfast for the kids, whatever it is, we can live our lives at the effect of the excuses we make for ourselves and others, or we can be accountable for our own greatness, how extraordinary we are, and our happiness, though we don't get access to those higher levels until we first quiet and be sure that that lower brain feels safe. That's a whole premise that we built our new company, OptiMatch, around. Are you guys familiar with Google's Aristotle project?
No, well, I think maybe. Let's see what you have to say about it.
I'll share it with you guys. It blew my mind when I studied this. So basically, in 2012, Google set out to find what has teams be successful. What is that
Mm.
secret sauce? They
Yeah.
studied 38,000 people, 170 different teams, and they had theories. They thought, oh, it's the people who go out for drinks. Oh, it's the people who are the same age or live in the same area. Wrong. The number one factor of successful teams, psychological safety.
Hmm.
That's really what we measure is we find, like, in fact, I'll give you a funny story about this that happened just the other day. We have a lot of service providers that we work with at our company, OptiMatch. And there was a service provider that I was finding myself to be a little bit irked by. I was like, oh gosh, I was getting a little annoyed by something and how it was done. So in OptiMatch, what we've discovered after studying this for 3 years is that we have four main motivators. Now you could argue that this is our theory. One motivator is fun. So some people are motivated by fun. Some people are motivated by facts. Some people are motivated by accomplishing and getting shit done or being a type A. And some people are motivated by other people's needs. So if my motivators and your motivators misalign with one another, if we're, say, 0 to 5 points above or below mine, is an OptiMatch. It's ideal. There's very little friction most of the time. In more cases, though, if you get to 10 or 20 points variability, I might feel frustrated by you or angry with you and not even know why. I've seen this with teams that we've consulted with and applied this algorithm with. And just the other day, I had a team, this person we were working with, and I was feeling so triggered and activated. And the person happened to answer the matching questions. And the moment I saw their numbers, that they were a significantly high facts person, or what we call Apple, in that moment, I dropped into deep compassion because I realized, oh my gosh, they're not being obstinate or misbehaving. They're just motivated differently. And that is the gift I wish I could give to the world. I wish that I could give it to romantic partners, to friends, to colleagues, to bosses, and those they supervise. I wish that we could all learn that what if we're not misbehaving? Just like I was treating that employee of mine a couple of decade or so ago. What if we're all just motivated differently? And what if we could cultivate compassion, empathy, and sympathy for the differences in our motivations rather than making one another wrong?
Yes. And that just brings us back to knowing thyself, right? Again, so you just mentioned, one of the key aspects that you think that is important is to quiet the noise. Now, does that really is the purpose around that really to just think about certain things that are important to you? I mean, I think that we are bombarded with so much information nowadays that we don't have time to think through issues or what if scenarios. What if this happened? How would I react? What if my girlfriend breaks up with me? How will I react with that? It's like, is that part of it? Is that just not thinking about things like that?
For me, I would say it's less of that. For me, I think that I don't want to call it a problem. I try to be very thoughtful of the words I use. The opportunity we have is even that is a slippery slope. Oh, what if my girlfriend breaks up with me? What if you could just sit quietly, regulating your nervous system, breathing? Then you're not going to come from a reactive place. You're going to be able to come from a proactive place. So even if your girlfriend breaks up with you, even if you get fired, even if your kid comes screaming or the dog's barking, that you can still be in your higher brain function and present and consciously aware, as my friend Arthur would call it. When we do that, when we quiet the noise, even if you did it for 1 minute a day, start with 1 minute a day, set an alarm for 1 minute a day to be in silence. We have so much. We have podcasts, we have news, we have media, we have all these things, people, cell phones, texting. What if we could just sit in silence? I spend 2 hours a day in prayer and meditation, and people say, why do you do that? I'm like, so I don't destroy the world. No, I'm just kidding. Because that's what allows me to connect to the deeper knowing. We all have the answers within us. It's that old adage, like, ha, 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 we all have the answers within us. I remember I was in the back of an Uber on my way to a place, a sacred site in Ireland. I was just going as a tourist and listening to a meditation. I recommend this. If you're on a subway, if you're on a bus, listen to a meditation maybe sometimes. Just sit down, quiet the mind. And I'm listening to this meditation, and they're going through some chakras and some simple stuff. And all of a sudden, boom, the formula for consciousness got downloaded. I was like, what? And I called my friend Don Hoffman, who he and Deepak Chopra and I do shows together. And I was like, Don, I just got this formula for consciousness. I know you're actually writing this scientifically. Does this sound accurate? And he's like, well, of course, Jennifer. In all the mathematical formulas I've been studying, you have to have a probability space square filled with nothing to multiply it to get to consciousness. And I was like, but you can't get that without the silence. I mean, that's a very esoteric example, but even knowing if you should take a job or not. I mean, I could go down a whole rabbit hole with you of something called human design as well, where I coach CEOs, and one of the first things I do when I coach them is I ask them for if they're willing, and I did this with anybody I work with, if they're willing, it's not required, to get their human design, which requires a birthday and where you were born at a time. And when you get that, 70% of the world are what's called generators or manifesting generators who feel clear yeses and nos in their body. So imagine, what if you had this like radar that you could feel, yes, it's a good idea to take this job, or no, it's not a good idea. I just had one of my coaching clients who got an offer on Shark Tank and decided to turn it down using this exact
Hmm.
methodology. And we have the capacity internally to know whether to go right or left, straight or backwards, to accept the job offer or to quit. And yet it's so muddied by all the noise. So the more we drop into that silence and learn to listen to ourselves and our inner knowing rather than all of the noise, whether the noise is from friends, loved ones, colleagues, or the news or the media. None of it is good or bad or right or wrong, but the power really does lie within us.
So basically, in quieting the noise and spending time in meditation, thinking about ourselves, develops that intuition
Mhm.
that we can learn to listen to that helps guide us through making those critical decisions in life.
Yeah, you could look up a dear friend of mine, Dr. Roland McCready, who's the lead scientist at HeartMath. This is not some woo-woo out there thing I'm telling you about. This has been studied for 40 years. I didn't know this before I met Roland 4 years ago. Did you know the heart has its own brain and that the heart sends more information to the brain than vice versa? And
Wow.
that they've actually done studies where one of my favorite studies HeartMath did, if you want to know more about the heart's intuition, is they scientifically studied it where they had a group of people and they randomly flashed images. And some of the images were very jarring images like death and war and horrible things or snakes. And some of the images were placid lakes. And a few, I think it's seconds or milliseconds before the image was even put on the screen, the participant's heart would respond and would know whether it was going to be an activating or a calming image.
Wow, that's incredible. It's just, I mean, I think that there's just so many things that we don't know, and we have to be open to these connections. I mean, I'm just seeing more and more, especially as we're dipping our toe into quantum physics nowadays and looking at quantum computers and dealing with reality that we see on a regular basis. We're finding that there's a little bit of an overlap between the metaphysical things in life and that are hard to explain in pure science. So I think that's just something that we need to keep our mind open to.
Yeah, it's all just something to play with. It's just not to get too stuck or entrenched, to be like the tree that I gave the example of, to be able to sway with the winds and to be able to be resilient and develop that stress so that when the hurricanes of life come hurling at us, literally or metaphorically, that we're able to bend with the winds of challenge and the tests that we're faced with. And that requires a certain level of mental, emotional flexibility. I remember my husband told me years ago, it was a brilliant piece of business advice. He said, before any important meeting, stretch your body, flexible mind. So I always try to do that before any important business meeting.
Good advice. So as we revisit the concept of you saying that we need to kind of like the tree, for instance, needs to have the wind, needs to have that stress, that to pressure test and build resilience. And what about our connections with others? Do we need to pressure test those from time to time as well?
It's a really great question, Sam. Let me tap into that for a second. I think that give me an example. Let's pause for a moment. Give me an example of how you would stress test it, and then we can.
Well, I often see that in society, and when pure strangers go through a common experience of a
Mhm.
calamity or something like that. I mean, you often see sometimes people get together and work closely with one another to solve the issue in that emergency mode. So I think that's a way that we can see some stress that brings people together and forms bonds that weren't there originally.
Mm, great question. So I would say, would I intentionally go out and cause people stress? No. Would I encourage people to do things that are outside their comfort zone to be able to cause them to create healthy eustress and pressure? Yeah, absolutely. When I built two schools, one in Nepal in 2017 and one in Senegal in 2019. Not comfortable, not easy, no running water, no toilets, digging, like working with rebar. If you had asked me in my 20s, will you be working with rebar in Africa with your dad? Probably not, would have been my bet. But in that way, I like to challenge myself. In fact, one of the things I like to talk about is there's a concept that says if you want to create a miracle, you first have to have a miracle in your own character to do something that's hard. So if we're sitting all bundled up in our cozy little comfort zone, to your point, we might not experience that greater growth. Yet when we push ourselves to do something that's challenging, now I want to distinguish this. I'm not saying to go out and poke the bear and challenge your husband or your child or whatever. There's a difference. Like I challenge my husband all the time in a loving way. We have a commitment of how we speak to each other, that we never say an unkind word to each other. And if one of us says an unkind word to either each other, or if we hear another person that we're being unkind to somebody on a phone call, then we challenge each other. And I'll say, my love, may I offer some feedback? I ask if I can give him feedback. And he'll say, yeah, honey, go ahead. I'll be like, is that really how you were committed to speaking to that person? Not from a place of judgment, truly from curiosity. He's like, probably not. I said, okay, cool. How might you have talked to that person differently? He said, I probably could have been a more considerate of where they're coming from. So in that way, yes, always challenging ourselves and one another to be the best version of ourselves. In that way, absolutely. But would I intentionally cause somebody harm? No, I wouldn't want to do that. But I think that we all have opportunities throughout every day in our lives to evolve. And I actually have a practice every night. It's a Kabbalistic practice I learned where I write down every night, how could I have lived today better? How could I have lived today better? Was I a jerk? I have had some moments, if I'm being totally transparent with you and with Sumit and your audience, where I have not been my best self in the last 24 hours. I've had probably 3 or 4 moments that if I had a eraser, I could go back and do it again. Didn't handle it well. Like I had a dog run up and attack me on the street yesterday while I was out walking. And I had a few words. I did not yell or scream. I was like in tears because I had been attacked by a dog as a little kid. And I said, ma'am, you're being selfish. Like I probably wasn't as bad as I could have been, but I also probably could have been more thoughtful and had it land better than being somebody who was upset emotionally.
Sure.
So I reflect every day, how could I have lived today better? What am I proud of myself for? Going back to that appreciation, what if nobody else acknowledges you? What if nobody else acknowledges you for that extra hour of work you put in that nobody else knows about, or that extra slice of cake you didn't eat, or the fact that you had water instead of soda with lunch, whatever it is? Acknowledge yourself for it every night. That's where it goes back to that self. When you provide yourself with everything you need, you become the sexiest person alive. One of my favorite techniques to teach clients, job seekers, CEOs, etc., inner child work. There was a popular talk I used to give a couple of years ago called How to Deal with an Office Jerk. And one of the things I taught people is that when somebody's being a jerk or acting out, you are not dealing with an upset 40-year-old or 70-year-old or 35 or 20-year-old. You are dealing with an upset 3-year-old. Just like me yesterday on the street, when the dog came barreling down the street at us, I turned into that upset 10-year-old who was being attacked by a dog. And I was not my 43-year-old Jennifer Cahill self. So, when we can cultivate that compassion and do the work to see, hey, how are we feeling? I sometimes will sit and do my inner child work in the morning, and I'll be like, sweetheart, how are you feeling? And she'll say sad or angry, and I'll be like, shit, I didn't know that. I didn't know I was angry or upset.
Yes. So, go ahead, Smith. I thought you were going to speak, Smith.
In fact, I had a question around what you were saying earlier about quieting the noise. So, in the age of social media, I think that's easier said than done when there's a strong tendency to measure our worth in the number of likes, comments, or reactions we attract on various platforms where we're at. And I think that also brings to fore the toddler in us where we react negatively to a lot of situations. So how does one coach oneself to quiet this noise when others around us and we ourselves are just saying, what I said on LinkedIn just got 3 likes. Nobody cares. Nobody loves me.
It's a great question, Sumit. So you're looking for external validation. When I go on a show, before I'm about to step on a stage, I only want to receive energy from myself or from whatever you consider source. So one of my dear friends and vocal coaches who trained Tony Robbins and others how to speak taught me this. The minute we look out there for validation, you will 1000% be let down. And if that is your experience, if your happiness, and this is you, any one of us, or me, and if any one of us, if our happiness is tied to how many likes our LinkedIn post got or whatever that might be, then I would invite you to get off social media for 30 days. I do it often. I get off social media for 30 days. I have days where I turn off my cell phone. Deepak inspired me to do that. I still haven't done what he does. He spends 2 weeks every year in complete silence with no cell phone. Most I've been able to manage is 48 hours. But I do it because we're addicted, Sumit. We're addicted to attention. We're addicted to talking. We're addicted to likes. We're addicted to validation. And when we start providing that validation, Sumit, it all starts with the self. That's why I put my right hand on my heart, my left hand on my abdomen, and I cultivate a relationship with myself. The same way you're going to date your significant other, right? Whether it's he, she, they, them, it doesn't matter. You're going to date them, get to know them. How many of us date ourselves? How many of us spend quiet time to ourselves? Hey, how are you feeling? What do you need? How many of us in the last week have asked ourselves, what do I need in this moment? Probably not a lot of us. And then we get angry at our loved ones for not providing it, or we get angry at our boss for not providing it. And it comes down, number one, to connection to self, and number two, Sumit, to become resilient so that when you do get it, sometimes you might feel that little, oof, that little, oh, yuck, I didn't get the 3 likes. But then if you use one of these tools to put yourself back into a state where you're quieting that amygdala, because you know who's saying the, oh crap, I didn't get more than 3 likes? It's that amygdala. It's that animalistic part of your brain that's still worried that you're going to be eaten by a tiger if you don't get 300 likes. Newsflash, you will survive it. If you don't get more than 3 likes on a post, great news is you will survive it. There is no tiger that will eat you.
Yeah, so Smith brings up a good point in the modern era of long distance relationships, I guess, in connecting with others. So I often think about a story my son was telling me, or he was actually experiencing. He's playing video games and and he has this headset on and he's talking to friends and he's talking to his other family members that are playing the same game from afar, and he's spending a lot of time. But when he gets off of that game, he somewhat feels empty. There's um, there's a difference between connecting online in a digital realm and then having that physical human connection with someone. So what do you think about that, Jennifer?
It's a very good point. I went through that firsthand during COVID. So I'd sold my company 2018, 2019, end of 2019, before COVID hit. I was planning to travel the world. I had like a month planned in Bali, a month planned in South Africa. Thanks for that little gift, universe. That was not on my plan list. So I found myself in COVID in March 15th or whatever it was, 14th of 2020, by myself, deathly ill in London for 2 months, where I knew one person who I couldn't even really see there, and didn't touch another human being for 2 months. And it was challenging. And one of my spiritual teachers said, you're addicted to touch, so work on that. Could you soothe without touch, let alone having that human connection? Another teacher of mine at that time said, could you connect with a human being just like I'm connecting with you right now? Do you feel heard and seen and connected to in this moment, Sam, with the way I'm connecting with you?
Absolutely.
So that's it. It's that you can create intimacy anytime, anywhere. When you have intimacy with yourself, I can have intimacy with a brick wall. I don't mean that as sexually. I mean, like literally, be that present with somebody. But I think most of us, to the point of your son and what his friends and others are going through, and I don't want to minimize this. This is something that causes, that's why suicide rates have gone up. That's why depression and anxiety and loneliness has gone up. It's because people are afraid and they're lonely and they don't know how to connect. But I'm going to reiterate this. It goes back to the connection to self. When we connect to ourselves, then being on the conversation on the video game is a cherry on top. Yeah, it's cool. We get to have it, but I don't need it. My husband knows this. My friends know this. They all kind of tease me that I won't miss them, but I don't need people. I love people. I cherish people. I have hundreds of deep, meaningful relationships that I would not trade the world. I have my dream soulmate. I talk to my mom every day. I talk to my sister. And yet I don't need people in the sense that when my dad died 2 or 3 months ago, my dad died February 25th. People are a little surprised, but I'm at peace. I love my dad. It wasn't like he was there and he's not there, and I still love him, and there's no
Yeah.
love lost, but it's not that I'm incomplete because he's gone. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. I can relate for sure. Well, and Sumit, did you have another question? I'm sorry, I didn't want to cut you off.
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. Well, Jennifer, I mean, I've learned so much just in this conversation with you in such a short period of time. I really thank you for sharing it all with us. But before we go here, what do you want our listeners to walk away from in this conversation? What do you want them to remember?
Be kind and compassionate to yourself, and that will lead to your ability to be kind and compassionate to others. As somebody who's a bit of a recovering jerk who used to be incredibly unkind, like my God, if you talk to the people I worked with when I was first building my first company or when I was a teenager, I did so many things that were unkind to other people, and that was really a reflection of how unkind. I mean, if you had lived a day in my head, you wouldn't have made it. That's how painful it was.
Hmm.
And the more we can cultivate that internal kindness, that internal compassion, even if everybody around you is being a jerk, you can still provide that to yourself. And that's the gift I wish I could give to every one of you. You don't need to look externally. You can provide yourself for everything and with everything that you need, and all the love you've ever desired. It's right there. You have it. And when you do that, you become the sexiest, most enticing, best job seeker, best boss alive, because then you're not trying to take. Then you just get to be with other people, and you get to choose how you get to be every day. So that would be my wish for everyone out there.
Great. Well, Jennifer, a lot of our listeners right now are thinking, Jesus, this is just transformational, and would like to learn more. I know that you have a variety of resources. There's things that you do on a regular basis, and talks and so forth. What is the next step a person can take to learn more about you and your practices and your programs?
Yeah, great question. So it's pretty easy. I mean, if you Google Jennifer K as in Kite Hill, you'll find all of my information. That's why it's when I wrote the first book, I realized there's another Jennifer Hill out there. I wanted to give her that name, so I added the K to my name to make it easy. So if you Google Jennifer K Hill, you'll find all my information. You can find me on the Regarding Consciousness podcast. It's been out for about 2 years now. We have new episodes go live every Thursday. And if you go to om.app, you'll be able to find the media page with a lot of other recent podcasts. This podcast will go up there along with others. And you can also, if you want to learn more about yourself, go to om.app/survey. Try our matching survey. You can know, we can definitely give you information about like, hey, how you're motivated. And then you can inform other people, hey guys, I'm very motivated by facts, so I might need a little bit more time than the next person. Or if you're like me, a lychee, that's what we call people who are like drivers. I might be a little bit impatient. So I try to tell people who I'm working with, hey, when I'm at my best, I'm really great. I'm take quick action. When I'm not, at my best, I might be a little impatient. So you can understand that more about yourself.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being with us today and sharing your knowledge.
Thank you. Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Sumit. And thank you to everybody out there, wherever and whenever you're watching this. Anytime I do a show like this or step on a stage, my intention is that maybe one person it made a difference for. So if this made a difference for one of you out there, then it was worth doing in my books.
Yeah, it's definitely made an impact on me. So thank you so much, Jennifer, for being
Likewise.
with us. I really enjoyed the discussion.
Thank you both. And yeah, just wishing continued conversations. Get curious, guys.
Yeah.
Life is like an unopened present. We get to keep opening it over and over every day and discovering new things. I've been on this journey for 20 years and I still learn new things every day, and we're always evolving. So be kind to yourself. And be
Wise
kind.
words.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining in on the People Strategy Forum this week, and we'll see you next week.